Hey, I'm Brad Miller, and I'm here with Jason Medford. And today we are continuing as we walk a spiritual path. Last time, if you tuned in, we were talking about crossing over bridges, over
Mhm.
troubled water, over River Kwai, over dark chasms, swinging rope bridges, maybe Mario bridges as you're, hopping from one place
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
another,
Mhm.
fireballs popping up or something like that. Um, you know, And kind of as we talked about that episode, and kind of after we finished recording, we thought there's probably some other things in there we could also talk about, maybe do a little deeper dive in.
Mhm.
So I think we're going to try doing that a little bit here today, and see if maybe we can flush out some of these things a little bit more for it, because I think there's a lot of good, juicy stuff that we can find in some of the metaphors and analogies we used last time.
Yeah, and I think it's always interesting because if you go back to a lot of the sacred texts or the way that the masters usually teach, it's usually in describing something or giving us kind of analogies or other things
Mm.
for us to learn from. And so again, that's really all we're trying to do here too, is because so much of the time in the spiritual path, you don't really have words for some of these things. And even though we might know 200,000 words in the English language, we have a hard time really kind of making sense of it or describing it. And so, here, we're just trying to share kind of some analogies or other things that we've come up with to try to help us make sense of it and are sharing it here. And I think it's always interesting what we end up writing down because, I'm sure we'll pick a couple of these things out of here, but one thing that Brad had written down when we were recording the last episode was life isn't math class, right? Because we
Mhm.
talked a little bit about that. So Brad, why did you write that down?
Yeah.
And let's kind of maybe dig into that one a little bit to begin with.
So I wrote that down because that's something I wanted to write about on LinkedIn.
Mm.
that I think
Oh,
that I
there
think
we go. All
that I
right.
think that
Check
I think
Brad's
would not.
post and
Yeah, no, I think would apply to other things beyond the spiritual path. And by the way, for those of you who don't follow us, you should follow us both on LinkedIn.
yeah.
So if you search for us, I'm sure you could probably find us, excuse me. We don't just talk about these fun things. Like the spiritual path stuff's fun, but there are other things out there too. And one of the things that I like to talk about on LinkedIn is helping other lawyers in particular to be happy in their law practices.
Mhm.
Because if you're happy, your clients are happy, and so I mean everybody wins at that point.
No, and usually your family is happy too,
Your
right?
family
Because
is happy,
happy mom or dad helps the rest of the family be happy too.
that's true. Regulators are happy.
Mm.
Regulating bodies and things like that are usually happy if your clients are happy because they're not complaining about you and everything else. So I talk a lot about, how to make yourself happy, how to be able to take time with your family or do the things you want to do and all that kind of stuff. Um, but when we were talking this last episode about the bridges and transitions and all that kind of stuff, the idea came to me about life isn't a math class because we were talking about how in math class the teacher says if you want to get full credit for the uh for the problem, you have to not only give us the right answer, but you have to show your work. If you don't show your work, if you just all of a sudden say the answer is seven without saying how you got to that seven, you only get partial credit from the teacher. And that I think primarily is because the teacher wants to make sure you know how to do it. You didn't just maybe guess, or just kind of got lucky and came up with the right number or the right answer. And so they want to see, can he actually do the problem the right way, work through it and things like that to come out to the right answer. Um, and so, that's something that we learn from a young age. My daughter does that in school now. She
Mhm.
needs to show her work when she does problems, in math class or whatever. Now, eventually, the teacher will be like, okay, I trust you can do this now. You don't have to show your work anymore. Just give me the answer. That's what I care about. But especially when you're learning, they say, we want to see the work, right? We want to show us how you did it. But life, and when it comes to the spiritual path, for case for our purposes here, is not like that. It's not like math class, because it's okay if you come to the answer and don't have the reasoning behind it. You may not know how you know something, or how you, or why you think something is the way it is. You just kind of know. You just have that feeling, you
Mhm.
know. And you want to call it intuition, you could call it gut feelings, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't require, and sometimes can't actually have an explanation behind how you got there.
Yep.
And so that was where I started to go with that, or the thought was when it came to writing it down, what I thought for LinkedIn post. But obviously, I think that applies again, particularly here with the spiritual path, because we just don't know sometimes where we get the things that we do. Um,
Well, or we can't really say sometimes how it
right.
came either, right? And we have to trust ourselves
Hmm.
when it does actually come in too. And so it's interesting because I think there's, at least I've got a couple of different bridges to go down on this discussion as well. But I think it's interesting as you were talking about math class, right? You're supposed to show your work, but you also have to show your work the way the teacher has instructed you to
Mm.
do it.
Yep.
Right. So again, if we take like a large, calculus or algebra question, right? There's a certain step and process that you're told you're supposed to go through in order to get the right answer. And I can't, again, it's been a long time since I took a math class, but you're supposed to, you know, uh, what is it? You add before you divide or multiply before I can't remember, right? But there's certain steps that you're supposed to go through, right? And you're supposed to simplify the problem down, and do these different things. And they kind of tell you step by step each of the things you're supposed to do and the order in which you are supposed to do it, right?
Mhm.
And so when you're showing your work, they're expecting you to show them the steps in the order that they expect, right? Well, you can solve problems different ways, right? You don't necessarily have to follow the steps in order all the time. And I think that's relevant, here as well, is so many people on a spiritual or new age, whatever kind of path you want to call it, they effectively get told like the 30-step process from their guru. And it's like, well, that's not how it works, right? And you don't have to follow those 30 steps, right? If you look at a lot of ancient traditions from around the world, a lot of them have maybe some different steps or use different terms to describe something that's similar, but the concepts and the practices in general are very similar, right? And so, there's a lot of different ways to get to where you're going. You don't have to necessarily follow a prescriptive set of steps in a particular order to
Mhm.
get the right answer, right?
Yeah, and I see that with my daughter at her school is that way. They'll say show it this way, and now show it this graphic way or something, and she'll have a couple different ways that they've showed her to do it, and she has to do it the way they tell her, whatever, whatever. But there's also different teaching systems have different methods and different
Hmm.
processes too. So this one teaching method, this one book will say this is how you do the problem. But maybe when we grew up and we took a math class, they had us do it a different way to figure out,
Well, and I don't know if your daughter has to do new math.
I don't even
I
know what
w-
that means.
I was
Old
confused
math, new
because
math, stupid. I
yeah,
don't
no,
know.
there's some. I remember my kids; they had them do some of it, and it didn't make any sense to me at all.
Mhm.
How they were kind of trying to teach them to do it. It was supposed to be quicker and easier, but I don't know. Maybe it is, but the point being, we're not here to debate which math uh steps are the best, but just to help describe that there are no right or wrong steps per se. There's no particular order sometimes that things have to be done in. It's just, getting there. And kind of another point, with this was sometimes you just look at something and you know what the answer is, right? So
Mhm.
again, you might look at a math problem and before you even have to do anything, you just kind of feel in or know what it is kind of from an intuition standpoint. And sometimes it's hard because when knowings come, it's hard to describe how you just know, right? And so when people try to press you on, it's like, yeah, but how do you know? Oh, come on, Brad, how do you know? Show me the proof, right?
Mhm.
And we talked about that before, where a lot of times the proof comes after you do it. You see after you believe, not believe after you see, right? And so, sometimes things will come to us and there's no particular steps or order that you need to go through. There's nothing that you need to do. You just know or feel something, right? And sometimes it's like I said, it's hard to explain, or
Mhm.
if you uh if you become aware of something, nobody's going to believe you as to how you know, right? It's like sometimes I will be in the physical proximity of people and I can kind of feel them, smell them a little bit, and I know what's going on or what their intention is
And
in
they
the
haven't showered apparently if you're
in the
smelling them.
background. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like me. Woo, yeah. Okay. Um, but it's hard to say to somebody that the the energy I just felt based on what you just said, right? Now I know something about you that I didn't want to know, as an example, right? Like, and I'm just gonna make up some stuff. Okay, I'm gonna make up stuff.
That's all
So
this podcast is us making up stuff.
it's
So
just us making up stuff because, surely I would have never had any experiences like this.
Mhm.
But, maybe I meet a man who is very angry and very egotistical. And the way that he interacts with me and the energy that I feel from him, all of a sudden, I know he beats his wife. And I know the kind of person that he is in private. I don't want to know that, but sometimes I just know it, right? Sometimes, I might just know an answer. So people are debating something or talking about something, and I just know what the answer is. And how do I know? I don't know. I just know, right? Or maybe somebody has been talking about somebody that they know, and I just know what that person looks like without ever having seen them. Now, how do you describe that to somebody else, right? I don't know. I just know. And sure enough, when I see somebody, it's like, yep, knew he wore glasses, knew he had hair that was about this long. How did I know that? I don't know. I just knew it, right? Other times where maybe things come in a different way, like somebody says something and I get the tingles in my body, right? Which is one of my truth signs, if you will. I'm going to call it that,
Mhm.
right? Is that when I'm, trying to maybe get an answer to something, or I hear somebody say something, when I get certain feelings in my body, it's a confirmation that my body is telling me that what I'm hearing is true, or what I'm asking or questioning is true, or I should do this or I should do that sort of thing. And in a lot of those instances too, it's like, I mean, unless it's a very close personal friend like Brad, and all of you that are out there, because I'm saying this publicly now, whoops. is I wouldn't explain why. Right? Now, maybe to Brad personally, I might say, shit, Brad, what you just said, that's true, man, because I just felt it. And Brad would know what I meant, right? Um, but a lot of people wouldn't. It's like, well, what do you mean, Jason? You got little tingles in your body, and so that makes you think that that's true? Are you kidding me? What kind of a whoop? It's like, but I've had enough experience that I know when I know. I know when I know. I don't care whether you think I'm right or not. I know I'm right. And it's not from a place of ego per se, of I want to be right. It's just I know when I know. And when I know. And I have to do what I know at that point. And I'm kind of talking around because it's hard to describe. So Brad, help me here.
Yeah, no, and the problem is because our speech comes from a different part of the brain than where we have feelings, where we experience these things. And so it's hard for us to make that connection because it's a different part of the brain that's kind of dealing with this stuff, right? Like, the speech is something that's kind of in more the advanced part of our brains. Other animals don't have the same kind of speech capabilities that we do, right? Because they have different developed brains at different stages or whatnot. Um, and so for something to be able to get into that, it's kind of has to be thought. It has to be, that kind of a conscious sort of analytical, whatever kind of a thing to be able to put that into words. But when we're talking about a feeling, a sensation, um, you can't maybe put it into words because the part that's sensing that is not the part that does words,
Mhm.
right? I mean, there's a distinction there, and so it makes perfect sense to me that that we can't explain those things in words. That those are things, that's just a different part of the brain that deals with it. And I see a big smile on your face. So there's something that
Well, because there's a couple of things that just popped in.
that's
Okay.
what we're here. That's what I'm here for.
That's what we're here for, right?
Yep.
And so again, they just popped in. I just know, or stories or experience just popped into my head,
Yep.
right? Why? I don't know, because I'm supposed to share them, I guess, right? And so I'll give you some little more concrete maybe examples that go back to just what Brad was saying, because we can't put into words sometimes the feelings or the knowings or the things that happen. Okay. And so I'll give you a couple of experiences. I'm on the road right now. Okay. I'm not home. And as I was leaving, obviously I go through and I know all the things that I need for while I'm gone. So I make sure over the course of a day or so, I kind of set things aside. And as I remember, I pack them and put stuff in, right? So I had everything kind of packed up or in my suitcases already ready to go. And I'm just about to leave. And I don't know how to describe this other than one of my hats looked at me. Is I was just kind of walking through the house, and all of a sudden, it's like this hat that was on the table just like looked at me, or I had this awareness of like this tunnel for a fraction of a second of seeing that hat. And the hat seemed to be saying to me, I didn't hear it in my ears, but I felt it of, you need to take me with you. And I'm like, okay. First off, analytical part of me is like, no, I've already got hats. I'm okay. I don't need it. But I've gotten to the point where when things like that happen to me, I just threw it in my suitcase. I don't know why, right? But for some reason, that hat was looking at me and was kind of telling me, I need to go with you on your trip. I had no plans for it. I didn't have it. I get to my location, and sure enough, there's a reason why I needed that hat, right?
It was a formal top hat party. So, I mean, it
It
made
was
sense that you needed
a
your top
formal
hat.
top hat party.
You
There we
just
go.
know,
Right. And
right?
I'm being vague on purpose. Right. But it was a hat. Right. And so how did I know? I don't know. I just knew. Right. And so I threw it in my suitcase. Right. I know somebody who is very good at going to the grocery store and knowing what food to buy. And I'm not talking about like a grocery list. So let's talk about, like it's not math class. So let's talk about math class living, right? Which is what I was taught during the week. You have a list, right? We had a list on our refrigerator growing up. And so when you needed something from the store, you would go write it down, right? So that was one of the steps. Oh, we're almost out of flour. I'm going to add flour to the list. I'm going to add
Mhm.
sugar to the list. I'm going to add tea to the list or whatever it is, right? So that as you're going through the week and you know about it, you've got a process of putting things on the list, right? And
Mhm.
maybe I need a melon, a watermelon or a cantaloupe, okay? Because those are two that I was taught something about, right? So let's say cantaloupe and watermelon are on the list. So I'm doing this all 3D, right? I go to the store and I pull out my list and I need a cantaloupe. So I go over to the cantaloupes, okay? Now, my mother taught me to smell the end of the
Mhm.
cantaloupe, and that was how you knew whether or not it was ripe, right? Some people kind of thump on them. Some people kind of hold them or shake them. Sometimes they'll shake them to see if the seeds are loose inside. I was taught to smell, right? A very 3D way of kind of checking the box, like doing your
Mhm.
math problem, right? But how much of the time do you smell it? You think it's okay, you bring it home, it's still green. It doesn't taste right. And
Mhm.
cantaloupe is one of those things where, I mean, cantaloupe is always good, but there's sometimes when it's just perfectly ripe and it like melts in your mouth and it's the best thing that you've ever had. And 95% of the time, it's a little bit hard, but it's still good, right? And so we can go through those 3D steps like that. Or I was taught to thump on the watermelon, right? And so I could go through and I could thump all the watermelons. And it's always fun. If you want to do something fun, just go to the grocery store, hang out in the produce section, and watch all the things people do to try to figure out if the produce is ripe and if they're going to buy it. Okay. So there's that way of doing it. That's like doing your math problem. Okay. I have a friend, doesn't go to the store with the list, just knows what she needs when she gets there. Why? Because as she walks around the store, things look at her like my hat looked at me
Or they call to her.
and said,
Yeah.
"Oh, broccolini." Goes over to the broccolini, right? Picks up different ones, kind of holds it, looks at them, holds different ones, goes through the bunch. These three, these three are the ones. Now that's all intuitive, right? Because that's what she's good at. She can actually taste the food in its raw form. So like you could put out like 20 oranges in front of her and she can tell you which one is like the perfect one to eat,
Yeah.
right? I'm learning how to do that in my own way. It's not
Mhm.
exactly the same way, but I'm getting to where again I can pick up a piece of meat or I can pick up oranges or other different things like that and just kind of feel them and look at them and kind of know which ones are supposed to come home with me.
Mhm.
And it's not even in the way that you would normally, because like I said, I've seen my friend do this, and it will look like uh, uh, maybe it's not perfectly shaped, or maybe it doesn't appear as though it's completely ripe. She opens that thing up, and my goodness, it is perfect, right? And I've even done this sometimes. I walk by the meat counter in the grocery store, and as I was walking by, it felt like the meat was sick, that most of the meat was sick. And I don't know how to describe that other than as I walked by, I had kind of this energetic feeling, and I kind of looked, and it kind of felt sad and sorry.
Mhm.
I didn't buy any of that meat, right? But the meat that jumped out at me, I did, and it was very good. So, how do you describe that to somebody? How do you prove that? Well, you
Yeah.
can't.
No.
But I know that by doing this myself over and over again, right, I'm getting more data points of and allowing myself to trust myself more now because of that.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
it's not the way my math teacher would have taught me to buy
Or
a
your mother with
cantaloupe.
thumping it.
Would have taught me to buy a cantaloupe,
Right.
right?
No, as you're kind of explaining that again, you can sense how it's tough to just like explain it to someone in words. We just don't have the words to really describe what that's like. But like I felt myself like nodding when you were saying like I looked at the meat and it just felt sick, and I'm like, yeah, yeah, I get that, I understand that.
Yeah. Or my
Um,
hat looked at me. Well, look is the wrong word,
right.
but it kind of looked at me.
Did it look at you like, did it call to you? Like, I mean, those are like word that I might use, but it's the same kind of stuff. It's somehow you're just feeling that energetic draw, some
Yeah.
energetic pull to it. But how do you, like I said, how do you explain it to somebody who's like, "Hey, what'd you bring that hat for?" I don't know. I just felt I needed to bring that hat. This hat was like, "Hey, pick me, pick me." Like, yeah, what do you do? Um,
You take the hat.
you
Right.
take the
And
hat.
again, I mean,
Yeah.
that's what we're talking about. And everybody that's listening, you can think we're crazy, and it's okay. It's okay.
If they're at the point
Because when
listening
I
to us
say it
this
out
long,
loud, I seem like I'm crazy.
well, I mean, if they're listening this long, they probably have gotten beyond that and they're like, okay, they're
Okay.
crazy,
Okay.
but there's something there that resonates with me, so I'm gonna keep listening. I mean, we're, I don't know, 60 some odd episodes in at this point, so like,
Yeah, but you just have to start trusting, and then you learn, right?
mhm,
You change the belief, and then you see, instead of seeing is believing, right? And
mhm,
it's uncomfortable at first, right? But that's one of the kind of basic beliefs that we have to kind of get rid of. We have to cross that bridge and not look back on questioning some of these different beliefs, and
mhm,
realize that it's okay, because our intuition, our higher self, or whatever you want to call it, as you start to tune in more and get out of your head, right? Move from your head to your heart and to other places in your body, then you start becoming more sensitive or aware of it at
mhm,
that point. And once you start to become more sensitive and aware, then you start to see things differently, right? Like now, when I'm in a group of people or I'm around people, I usually kind of hermit myself away because it's hard for me to manage some of the energy or that most people are giving off. But I look differently, right? I mean, I'm still doing some of the cues like I might have before, from an analytical standpoint. What are people wearing? How are they standing? What's their body language? Different things like that. But I'm starting to pick up and read the energies much better too. And I'm starting to focus more on that. It's not so much what people might say or what they might do, but what's the energy that they're putting off, right?
mhm,
And that's what I'm, kind of playing with and growing into and learning more, just like with food. It's
mhm,
like that energy. the food gives off energy. The food is living too. And, some have been taken care of better. Even the same thing. It's like when I put my food in my basket, I don't just throw it in either. It's like the minute that I decide it's coming home with me and it's going to become a part of me, right? So think about that your food, it's life eating life. And so that food is going to become a part of you. So how you toss those oranges or lemons into the cart, is in a way how you're respecting yourself as well, because that's something that's living that is going to help you sustain life.
Mhm.
And so it's the same thing like, the old Native American customs of when they would hunt. They kill the deer or the elk or whatever it is, and one of the first things that they do is go up and offer, gratitude
Mhm.
for the sacrifice that this animal is making so that they can survive life. And there was, again, depending on the tribe you were in or still in, they kind of have some different rituals about it. But things like, dear, I am grateful to you for your sacrifice of your life, that I may eat your flesh and sustain my life, that I may, use your bones to make tools to sustain me, that I may use your skin as my skin to clothe me from the cold and from the sun, and they would kind of go through like this whole thing. And when you stop and start to think about it that way, then you're starting to actually connect with the other living things that are out there as well. And a lot of times it's things that, we don't even take notice of. And I'm in a hotel right now, so I go outside and sit outside and sit on a planter because I smoke. Nobody can know that, but now everybody knows that. But I'm sitting kind of on this planter box, that has dirt in the bottom and some bushes in it. And I'm sitting there and I uh, spit into
How dare
the.
you, Jason?
How dare I do that,
You
right?
smoke and spit.
I know. Inside the thing, right, onto the dirt. And then all of a sudden I look down and there's some little potato bugs in there. We used to call roly polies, the little things with like a whole bunch of legs that kind of rolls up into a ball to protect itself and then they open back
Bugs.
up.
Bugs.
Bugs.
Sorry. I
Oh,
thought you said potato buds, like the little
bugs.
come out of the ground. No,
No,
bugs.
potato bugs. Bugs.
Gotcha. Yep.
Okay. And I didn't take much notice of it. And then I look back in a few minutes and there's a whole bunch of little potato bugs around my saliva. And, at first it's like, well, that's kind of interesting. And then I started thinking about it in the way that I was just describing, like with the deer. And it's like, interesting. These little potato bugs are waiting. I mean, it's a dry climate here, so yeah, they're going to get some sprinkle, when the sprinklers go off. But my saliva, it was helping them to sustain their life as well. It's like some of these little things that we don't realize the connectedness that we have with all other things, both ways. The bush that I'm sitting next to is emitting oxygen. I'm blowing carbon dioxide, which is helping it. It's giving me oxygen, right? The tree is giving me shade, right? So I'm not in the sun solidly, and anyway, I don't know how we went down that bridge, but it seemed like we needed to go there
No,
there
no.
too.
I think you made it really, one thing I really liked that you talked about it was the fact that you're playing with this stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good point that life should be play. I mean, and again, I need to write this one down too as another potential episode. Life is play, or play in life, because I mean, part of the reason I think we're here is to have fun, to enjoy the human experience. And when you see what you do is in terms of play as opposed to being very serious, I'm a lawyer. That's very serious. I'm a very serious person doing very serious things, right? Like, no, like I have fun. Like we joke around, we do this podcast, um, sometimes, somebody asked the other day about, said you have to if you're 5 years old and in kindergarten, I'll bring you donuts. And my question to them was, well, I act 5 years old. Do I have to be like physically, chronologically 5 years old or not? And they said, we'll see. Um, but just fun things like that back and forth. But I think a really great way to work on yourself, to go along this spiritual path, is to treat it as play, is to have fun with it,
Mhm.
because that takes a lot of pressure off of it, a lot of the stress off of you, and opens you up to things. And you talked about, the fruit. That's I think, a great thing for somebody to do. Very easy to do. Go to the grocery store, go to the produce section, to say you're just, maybe if you've got a specific kind of produce you're looking to buy, looking to buy cucumbers. My daughter loves cucumbers, so so I have to buy those a lot. So you go to the cucumbers and you look at them. And like you said, maybe you pick it up and you kind of whatever, but how do you decide what cucumber to get? I mean, they all look pretty similar. They're all
Mhm.
green and maybe have a little bit of bumps on them or something, or the size is about the same. Like, how do you pick one cucumber versus another? Have fun with it. Which one seems like it's the one that you should pick?
Mhm.
Which ones say, hey, I want to come home with you? Or, maybe you're drawn to one versus another one, or, and take it home and see.
Well, just
Um,
and like you said, and just play with it because you might get different answers or get in different ways than I do. I mean, some of the different ways, like you said, you can hold it in your hand. One thing I've played with is holding two things, one thing in
mhm,
each hand, and kind of ask myself the question, left or right. And I'll usually get some kind of an answer of, oh, right. Okay. So then I'm going to take the one in my right hand. Right. And if I need two or three of them, then, maybe I do that a few times. Right.
mhm,
Um, it could be just looking at it, or, sometimes I've done that where I've looked down in the bin and it seems like, one of them was kind of calling to me.
mhm,
Right. Well, you can pick it up, do other stuff, and see if that's the case. Right.
mhm.
Um, I mean, there's, you don't need to get on your knees and and pray in the middle of the grocery store, right? Oh God, show me which orange
You
I should take
can, like,
home.
don't get us wrong. Like, if that's your thing,
If that's your thing,
go
you
for it.
can, but there's different
Yeah.
ways to get it. You might feel a tingling or a sensation in your body. Sometimes I've had where I've been holding things in my hand and it feels like electricity a little bit is going on like between me and the thing, and it's like, oh well, that's probably a good thing, at least for me. I'm
Mhm,
going to take that one, right? But you might as well play with it because it's these little exercises and the little bits of play that
mhm,
help us to open up more to our intuition and to those knowings that we've been talking about. And again, sometimes we don't know how we do it. I mean, I do some things and I'm like, not really sure how I did that, but I did, and then I go back and try to figure out, well, what did I do different this time? So that maybe I can replicate that again.
mhm.
But if you're not playing with it, then you're never going to find out.
Yeah. And again, like I said, the grocery store is an easy place to play and to work, because you're likely going there maybe once a week or so. You gotta get food, so it's a great opportunity. Pick up a cucumber, figure out which one looks better, or I do with the berry, packs of berries, little plastic containers. Like, I kind of look at them and I just, one of them just seems like the one to take.
Mhm,
And so that's when I grab. Like,
mhm.
you can't really smell them. Can't really, I mean, you really shouldn't like squish them or try to taste them to see which ones, but I just kind of say, up.
I have seen people do that. You know,
I will admit sometimes I do grab the grapes out to check the grapes to see how they taste. Um, but yeah, but just play around with it and see what seems like it's the choice to pick, and don't worry about whether you're right or wrong or what you think. Just grab it and go. And my guess is 90% of the time it's going to turn out just the way it needed to be.
well, and it's an easy way of playing with it, right?
Mhm.
Because what's the worst thing that's going to happen? You're going to get home with something that's maybe not ripe enough, or maybe is spoiled,
Not as
or
flavorful full as another one might be or
flavorful as
something.
the other one might be. It's not that big a deal. But the
Mhm.
more you do it and the more you lean into it and play with it, I guarantee you, you're going to start coming home with some amazing food. Like I said, yeah, okay. I mean, the flavor quality and everything else is going to go through the roof. And again, I don't know how much of that is uh, because of the produce itself and how much of it is because of the love that I start putting into it from the grocery store.
But it doesn't
It
matter.
doesn't matter, right? But it's not just picking the thing because like I said, I mean, I have some quirks to me. And it's like that, try to be very gentle as I put it in the cart, gentle as I carry it into the home, make sure that, if things come in plastic, try to get them out of the plastic as quick as possible and into glass or some other kind of container. Because again, a lot of times the berries are screaming at me like, get me out of this plastic, you know? I don't know. That's what it
It
feels
hurt.
like
It burns. It burns.
it burns. I mean, that's what it feels like they're saying, and so I do that, right? But it's, for everybody it can be different, but I'm putting love into it, right? In the way that I'm caring for it, when I prepare food, just like I talked about washing dishes, right? Well, it's the
Mhm.
same thing. I'm loving and blessing and grateful for the food as I'm cooking it, as I'm preparing it, as I'm eating it, right?
Mhm.
Making sure not to waste anything if I can help it. Eating leftovers or doing things even like, a lot of times the peels off of things make a great
Mhm.
compote. And a lot of the nutritional value in things are in the skins, but we never eat them. We peel them off and throw them in the garbage, right? But there's still nutrition that we can often get out of it in different ways. So the more that we do that, and in a way, it's kind of an ancient tradition. Like I said, the Native Americans have been doing this for a long time. It's just one that we're very familiar with here in the United States, but it translates into other,
Mhm.
societies as well. But the more that we can do that and really be grateful for, bless it, use, what we can. I mean, because that was one of the things that used to make the Native Americans cry and would make me cry too, was like the buffalo hunters that would come out and shoot the buffalo and just take the skin and then leave the carcass to rot. And, really kind of only taking the skin from that sacred animal and just slaughtering them and without actually, using up its full potential. Right, because again, all these things that come to this world too, that are beings and energy and everything too, they have their part to play in this world. And I always love it. It's something that I kind of say too, like a little bit in joking, but not in joking. Like, boy, that cow sure lived up to the measure of its creation. That was a mighty good steak, right? And so when we think about it that way, each of these things are coming to this world to ascend, to develop and grow themselves and be a part of this whole big play, and letting everything play its part and be grateful for everything and its part, whether we understand it or not. I still don't know what potato bugs actually do. I think they eat decaying material. I don't really know what they do, but I had much more of a connection this morning as I sat and watched them and I thought about them and I send them love along with my saliva. And yeah, and that gets back to some of the connection stuff that we've talked about here before too, which in my estimation is a lot of the reason behind the spiritual path.
So we started this episode by saying that we were going to try to hit a couple of different points from a previous podcast. Obviously, we did not accomplish that today. Um, we took hold of one point and we just really wrote it home as hard as we could. Um, and so, I mean, I think you could probably summarize this podcast episode thusly: go to the grocery store and play with some melons. You go to the grocery store and play with your melons, and
Cucumbers, Brussels
or
sprouts, whatever,
whatever it
whatever
might
tickles your
be. Yep,
fancy. Yeah.
yep. Tickle your pick, whatever if you've got. But go to the grocery store and play with it. But don't try to think it through because you can't. Don't try to be analytical about it and do a Sherlock Holmes sort of deal and be like, well, this one looks like this, and the country of origin is yeah. Don't do all that. Just go and see what feels right, what calls to you, what you're drawn to, what seems like it's the right thing to do, and then do it.
Yeah.
That's really what it comes down to. And the
Because
more you
life,
practice it, the more you do it, the easier it's going to be, the more you're going to be able to pick up on these things. And it'll just seem more commonplace to you when you think twice about doing it. I don't think twice about berries anymore. Like I just kind of look through it and I don't even think about it now. It just happens. So
well, and just a reminder that life isn't math class. So there's no
right.
prescribed steps and order in which you have to do any of these things. And just relying on the 3D by itself of thumping and smelling and doing all that kind of stuff um, doesn't necessarily give you the best answer. So why not just start playing with, leaning into your intuition and figuring out how you, right, can figure it out, because it's a simple little exercise like that, but it has so much more application in the rest of your life, because the better you get at doing that, even by going to the grocery store, the
Mm-hmm.
easier all the other answers are going to be, because you're going to be more connected, you're going to be more intuitive, and help you kind of, in the spiritual game, which, like we
Mm-hmm.
said, is different than the 3D game.
Great.
So,
Great. Well, with that, we thank you guys for joining us. Hopefully you enjoyed it, found some
oh,
found benefit. I think it's a really good way. It's a good, very practical thing you can do. Go to the grocery. I mean, I know that's not really where we kind of started this episode with, but it's kind of getting out of your head and the idea of just trying stuff out. And again, the groceries is a really easy, low key place to do it.
yep. And it's something that you all probably do anyway. So just
Yep,
play with it a little bit and see where it goes from there. So
that's right.
enjoy your next trip to the grocery store. Let us know how it went.
Tell us about, yeah, we want to hear all about the melons.
All right. Well, with that, we'll see you on the next episode. Have a great week, everybody.
See you guys.